Hello, looks like we're live. It is Tuesday, February 26th of 2019. And it's Tuesday, so it's not a typical stream day for me, but I had done some thinking about... Oh, I forgot to open a tab to show you what I'm talking about. Dang it. Wow. Quality streamer right here. I finally have... I sat down and thought about how I want to implement the last little feature of setup config format, which is a tool to format the packaging data for Python packages. Currently it does some normalizations around like names and sorting and some interesting stuff like that. But the last thing that I wanted to implement was adding the Python requires and Python related classifiers automatically. Because right now, I kind of manage these. I kind of manage these manually right now, which is a little bit annoying. And I would like those to be a little bit more automatic. And you can see that I don't even use Python requires here. And I probably... I only test against 2.7, 3.6, and 3.7. Is that true? I forget. Do we test against 3.5? No, I don't test against 3.5 anymore. But it would still be nice to, claim that the support matrix lines up or whatever. And so what the correct Python requires would probably look like is something like this. So 2.7 is definitely my minimum version. Typically you do not equals 3.0.star, 3.1.star, and this is super tedious, and another reason why I want to automate it. So you'd put something like this, and 3.4 is the current minimum supported version from CPython, and so this is probably what my tool will default to outputting. However, there's some kind of interesting knowledge encoded in this, you need to know that it supports Python 2.7, and I'm gonna try and key off of that on two different ways. One of them is look for this classifier if it's already there, because if somebody put the classifier, they probably know what they're doing. And the other thing is to look at, or the other thing that I can possibly guess with is to look at talks.ini and assume, oh, if you have Python 2.7 here, you probably support Python 2.7. That's gonna be a lot of hand-wavy guesswork, I guess. And hopefully it works. That's the basic plan. I kind of outlined it here. So we're basically doing two things. We're either inferring classifiers from Python requires or inferring Python requires, which I originally wanted as an option, but I think I'll just make it always on and maybe a way to turn it off. The other thing we'll be doing is inferring Python requires based on whatever information we can figure out. So that's the plan. I don't know how exactly I'm gonna do that, but I will show you a fun bug report I got in a project right now. So I'm a maintainer of Flake8, and GitLab always does this. It's really annoying. And well, great. Thanks, GitLab. Apparently Flake8 can be really, really slow if you pass it a lot of exclude patterns or something. I don't know, they didn't actually give a reproduction of this bug. And so I went and tried to reproduce it. And I have this very silly setup here. Where maybe it was in this tab. Yeah, so I use this command here, which writes out a Flake8 config file with a bunch of just garbage exclude patterns. So you can see here that it templated out, or I echoed out this bit, and then this was from the xargs command that I ran. And so it just adds a bunch of patterns. And when I run, let's see, Flake8 startup py, in single process mode, then it takes quite a long time when, well, that was first run maybe. It takes quite a long time when there's 257. But when you decrease that by 1, I think. Yeah, the time drops like pretty drastically. Maybe let's decrease it by 2. But it was it was like 700 milliseconds versus like 1.2 seconds. I don't know. This is still like a pretty big jump, like 200 milliseconds between these two. But like 10 milliseconds between these. But anyway, I thought it was interesting, but I also think like if your setup.cfg is this long, you probably have bigger problems, and you should probably find a different way to implement your configuration. But anyway, that's fun emails in my inbox for today. But yeah, let's try and do some setup config format. New haircut, who dis? Yeah, I really like the haircut. I hate getting haircuts because then I look in the mirror and I'm like, who is that? Oh wait, it's me. And then I have to deal with it until it grows out. And then inevitably it'll grow out and I'll be like, oh, I want to cut my hair. And then I cut my hair and then go through the cycle all over again. I could just shave it off and then don't have this problem anymore. But yes, I got a haircut. Looks good. Well, thank you. I thought it was okay. It's still like kind of annoying because it's like very floofy on top, and there seems to be nothing I can do about it. But what are you gonna do? All right, so I want to write some tests for this. I think I'm gonna start with this behavior first because I think it's the easiest, or at least it's going to be the most interesting, where we'll try and actually this is going to be way easier. Let's do the Python requires first. Test guess Python requires. Thanks for stopping by. Have a good one. So we're gonna first have the default behavior where it tries to guess Python requires, but there's nothing there. So actually that's kind of already covered by the default cases above. So let's give it something to guess. Python 2 talks ini. So this is just going to be a crappy heuristic that might work, but I don't know. Yeah, like if Tux doesn't stay as popular as it is right now, like this is not a very good heuristic. And honestly, I think like Envlist is optional anyway, so you know, like you can run Tux. Like, let's see. Where's some project that I have? Yeah, here's one. So like I don't list Py 3.5 in here, but do I have Python 3.5 installed? Right. But I can run tox-e Py 3.5 and it'll create the environment, and I think it's the right Python version. We'll see when it actually starts running. TikTok, come on, let's go. Yeah, so it'll run Python 3.5 without me actually configuring it. So Envlist is pretty optional. But we'll try it anyway. It's really just going to be like a series of guesses that hopefully get to the right values. I forget which section this is supposed to show up in. Python requires... Okay, so it's supposed to show up in the options section. Oh, and I just realized that we're gonna break this test immediately afterwards, because we're gonna populate classifiers here also as well, but not in this pass. So, well, version options. And so we should generate, similar to what I showed before, 2.7 greater than or equal to 2.7. And we'll, let's see, min Pi3 version 3.4. And this is the one option that I'll have to set up. I'm only passing this option here so that it makes the output deterministic. Though I think in actuality I'll make this default to whatever version that I've picked when I make a release. I don't know. That's our test, and we'll start iterating on that. Yeah, we already have a failure because we don't know this option here. Actually, I think I can just call this argument min version, min Python version. Sure. And Python version. Typo here. We'll also later need a max Python version to handle the classifier stuff, but for now we'll just do min Python version. Might as well spell this out. And we'll need, even though it fit on one line, we'll need a new line later for max Python version. And I'm going to make this a keyword-only argument so that we always have to specify it and always have to name it, just because I think it'll read better that way. But that should make the test not crash with system exit now. It should just fail this assertion here. Yep. So now it's returning 0 because it made no changes, but we're going to force it to make changes now. So here we want to guess Python version. And so we have a couple ways to do that. Well, I have two planned ways to do that. Either I guess there's kind of three ways. One is to take this and modify it based on this argument. The other is to read from talks.ini, and the other is to read from classifiers. But yeah, we'll try and think about that a little bit. I'm kind of doing this live because I don't quite know how I want to approach this, which is fine. It's good to be stuck. like I have all the ideas in my head, but it's more like how do I translate that into a bunch of if statements that I don't hate. So I guess the first thing that we can do is like come up with some sort of data structure that will represent Python requires. I think it mostly comes down to like a lower bound and an exclusion, I think. Python requires. Maybe we'll make another function for this. Version equals and Python version. Sure. So something like this. We'll make an API that returns either none or string. We'll pass it in. Yeah, I guess we'll pass it the file name, although it'll need to reparse this configuration, which is kind of annoying. I wonder what config parser gives you if this section doesn't exist. Okay. Takes 3 positional arguments, but 4 were given. See, I don't work with config parser very often, so I don't know its API. To the docs. No, 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 no. I don't want to bookmark you. Fall back. That sounds like what I want. Hey. Okay. Seems to do what I want. Current value equals. So we'll try and retrieve the current value. We'll use the file name so that we can look around. Look around relative to it. Oh, we also want the classifiers too. Here, I think we'll fall back to the empty string. We'll probably fall back to none as well here. All right. File name. bunch of keyword-only arguments. What do I call this? Current value. Maybe that should go first. Oh, the ordering these is kind of wonky. Or maybe I should just not have these and reparse the config. That seems fine. So kind of annoying that we have to parse this twice, but I think it's fine. It's not going to be super slow and it's not going to be performance critical, so reparsing is not a lot of work. Okay, so we're basically going to keep track of the minimum version and an excluded list. And so we can start by populating this with the current value. So here we want to, I guess if it's greater than or equal to, we'll set that as the minimum. And if it's not equal to, then we'll set it as excluded. And if we see anything weird, then I guess we'll just return. And that way it's a no-op and not a crash. I guess it's part that starts with So I think that implants what we want. Let's just use breakpoint. Current value was none, so minimum should still be none, and excluded should still be none. Let's give it a test where there's actually one specified here. This should be 3-2 so that it doesn't rewrite this. Although, let's make it more realistic. A little bit more typing, but slightly more realistic. Wow, first time here while it's live. Good evening. Well, nice of you to stop by while it's actually happening. What time zone are you in? So I'm just running a very specific test here. Invalid mode. I must have too many commas somewhere. Yes, in fact, I did have too many commas. Alright, so we're here. We should have parsed a minimum and several excludes. We did get the minimum, that's good. And the excluded parts. That's good. Should also make sure that this case is hit right now while I'm thinking about it. So we want to check the case where there's some weird comparator that we don't recognize, so something that's not greater than or equal to or does not equal. What if there's examples of this? Uses the PEP 440 spec, so it could be anything? What does this mean? Tilde equals compatible release clause. Compatible release. Compatible release clause consists of this operator and a version identifier. It matches any candidate version that is expected to be compatible with the specified version. Does this work? Because this is way better than this shenanigans. I guess I can try it and find out. Right now, you're in Eastern time for a couple of days, but you're usually in UTC +2, which is 10 hours different. Yeah, that would make it kind of rough. Although, let's see. Yeah, even when I stream on the weekends, I usually stream on at like 1 Pacific California time, and so that would be like 11 o'clock your time, which is pretty late. I would go to bed before that. But yeah, I assume you're on vacation or something in Eastern time, or like visiting New York or something. Don't mean to like guess your location, but business trip, nice. That works too. All right, so I'm gonna try this squiggly equals because I'm skeptical. Although, how am I gonna do this? I think I need to set up a PyPI server and a package and then try and install it. Let's try that. Data. Okay, so it's like squiggly equals 2.7 and squiggly equals 3. We're gonna do 3.6 because I have 3.5 installed, and that'll be easy for me to test. Or I can use 3.7, slightly easier. What am I doing? Python. There we go. Okay, so we have some distributions there, and then make some virtual-m's, and we'll run a PyPI server, I guess. Oh, I got pinged in a channel. What's going on? I see. I got pinged in the PyTest IRC. Someone was asking about a specific plugin that I don't know much about, but found the bug and just needed a PyPI release. I think PyPI server is one of the okay ones. PyPI server. Packages directory. That sounds fine. Dist. Okay. And then another tab. HTTP localhost 8080 requires this, but Python is 367. So that sounds right. And if we change this to 3.7, okay, it doesn't work. Surprise. Why doesn't it work? Oh, greater than or equal to this, or equal to that dot star. So let's try this again. So is this supposed to be 270? Wait, it should have matched 3 dot star, right? Yeah. Well, this doesn't work. Do not want to distract you off your current endeavor, but have quite a few questions. Yeah, ask questions. Go ahead. That's what chat's for. I want to make sure this doesn't match 2.7 before I tell this person they're wrong on the internet. I don't mean to be negative, but... Oh, I need to rerun the PyPI server. Yeah, that doesn't work. Oh well, this is the right way to do it. But this will also give me some other specifiers to try. I guess I could just use tilde equals 3.6 as an example. It should do nothing because it's a no-op. Too many characters. And just because I want to make sure that it goes into the branch that we were trying to test for, I'll put a breakpoint here. This Python requires left alone. The first test, not the second test. And that looks right. And this is the breakpoint that we expected hit, which was in this weird case. Okay, so that handles that test case. Oh, I lost my other test. Oh well, whoops. So I asked you once about concrete syntax trees and lib2-3 from the standard lib. Do you use it anywhere? Is it broken without a chance of recovery? Any good alternatives? Yeah, so I do have one project where I've used it. Xor refactor lib. So this was kind of my first taste at automatic refactoring, and I worked on it with a previous coworker. But the, like, kind of crazy, but also, like, kind of a good idea that I wish I kind of had, but the idea of this library was to take syntax and turn it into XML. And so it supported a couple of different languages, one of, like, JavaScript, Python, and Cheetah, and Python kind of broken, but and Cheetah is a templating language. Cheetah template Cheetah. It's dead now though. Although somebody's been trying to. Oh, maybe not. No, it's pretty dead. Unless this fork has started taking patches. No. Cheetah is dead. But at one point, I still work on it sometimes. Buck and I, the same person who we worked on RefactorLib together, decided to take Cheetah and remove everything that sucked from it, and we ended up with Yelp Cheetah. I used to work at Yelp, so that's why it's called Yelp Cheetah. But we made lots and lots of changes and lots of removals of stuff that just like people should never ever use. And then did a bunch of optimization and upgraded to Python 3 and had to refactor a bunch of code along the way. And so refactorlib was kind of essential in doing those rewrites to make sure that like Yelp's code bases continue to work while we improved this templating language. But the way refactorlib works is it compiles an AST into XML, and then you can use XPath and any LXML transforms to rewrite the code. And it worked pretty well. It works well for JavaScript as well. We used Reflect.js to basically shell out to Node and find a parse tree for a JavaScript file, and then do the same XML dance. And for Python, we used lib2to3, and it mostly works, but we found like a bunch of like not great bugs with it. Like the first bug that we ran into is the encoding regex that they had was not right. Then the next bug that we ran into, well, here's one of the ones where I just like monkey patched the grammar, which you can see I've done a couple of times to make it kind of work. But we basically found like a bunch of bugs in lib2to3, and for the most part they've been fixed. Like in Python 3.8, all of these bugs that I'm referring to are mostly gone. Is it broken without a chance of recovery? I think it could be improved to be correct. I think it will never be as fast as I would want it to be. And it suffers from being a separate implementation of the parser from the actual Python parser, and so often it drifts or like doesn't have features that are necessary. But I think it could be better. Black uses blib2to3. Yeah, so blib2to3 is actually lib2to3, but then Lucas has applied some patches to it. So like this originally was just a vendored copy of lib2to3, and then there were improvements made to fix some of the bugs that I pointed out. Yeah, see, it was originally grafted from 3.7.0 beta 2. Reasons for forking: consistent handling of F strings for old people. Yeah, backport of this bug, which is actually one of the bugs that we hit here. Fails to parse when list comprehension ends with a comma. So, not the only person to have run into this. But yeah, this crash I've seen many times, and not just in refactorlib, but in other tools that use lib2to3. So like YAPF, Google, which is one of the Python formatters. It uses lib2to3 as a backend, and so it suffers from all of the lib2to3 bugs. Well, I'm gonna not be able to pronounce this, but thank you, Xinghang, for following. Every follow counts. I'm so sorry that I mispronounced your name. But yeah, like YAP, YAPF, I don't know, however you pronounce it. It uses lib2to3 in the backend, and so it has, like, I think there's a label for it. It's like lib2to3 bug. It's like unfixable things that there's nothing it can really do about until like the standard lib fixes the bug. But I think like I said, I think lib2to3 could be made correct. I don't think that's the hard part. I think the hard part is like stopping it from drifting and making it fast enough that it's useful. I wish, and like this is actually going to get way better in Python 3.8, which is kind of cool. Let me Get my AST prettifier out. Just make some code here. Oh, I didn't add the the end information in there. There's more. What I'm trying to get at is there's more information here. Is it adders? What is it? Attributes. I keep accidentally typing N as in like next when I really want N's in node. I think I can just change this to this. Yeah, so here's the cool stuff is like in the current AST you get line number and column offset, but in Python 3.8 we get n line number and n column offset. So in theory you could use this to almost build a concrete syntax tree, like get very, very close. But it's like retroactively. Let's say like we take this call which starts at 2.4 and ends at 2.12. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So it starts here and 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 ends here, and so you could, in theory, like if we were gonna go refactorlib style, like you could figure out that this is a call node here. So it's promising. I'm excited for 3.8 to be finished and done and be able to start using this. But until then, like. Until then, even when that's out, I don't know that I'll be able to make tools that use it for quite some time because people will not upgrade to 3.8 very rapidly. In fact, if you look at like PyPI stats, does it work? What? No. PyPI stats. Let's take like a project that, well, we can even take PyTest, popular project. And you look at the fraction of users using whatever language version, you can see that 3.6 is dominating everyone else, and like it doesn't look like 3.7. Like 3.7 is barely taking market share here, and I would kind of expect like if there, I guess I would expect if there were killer features in 3.7 for it to kind of take off, but you don't really see that happening here. Like 3.6 is still the highest percentage. I do see like a slight downtrend in Python 2, which is good, but it's still way higher than it should be. But my point here is like I don't think we'll see Python 3.8 adoption in the same way that we saw 3.6 adoption, because they're like 3.6 had f strings and that was a pretty killer feature, and like 3.7 had what? Breakpoint? Nothing else like super exciting, so it doesn't really have that much adoption. I also think that some of its adoption is relative to when operating systems shipped. So like Ubuntu Bionic shipped with 3.6 as its Python 3, and I think that actually made a big difference. I don't actually know because I don't have the stats for operating systems, but that's my guess. But that was a long-winded sideswipe about lib2 to 3. Does that kind of answer that question? Oh, asyncio.run in 3.7 new features. Yeah, I have a confession. I haven't written. Well, I've written like one asyncio function so far, but so I haven't been excited about those things yet. But one project that I have planned to work on once I finish some of my like 50 in progress projects is to write a chatbot for Twitch. I know there's a million out there and I could just reuse someone else's, but I kind of want to try, like, find an actual project and a reason to write asyncio, and I think that's a good candidate. So maybe when I do that, I will get excited about asyncio. But until then, I just don't care. I see this change passes in 2.7 and 3.6, and if so, I'll make a PR for it. I thought I had already done this patch, but I guess I forgot. Oh, 2.7 passes, that's good. I guess Python 3.7 also had Unicode mode, but if you knew enough about Unicode to care about Unicode mode, you probably have already fixed it in whatever version of Python you're using. I guess that's nice. I made a patch on a tangent, so it's a useful tangent. And the code's cleaner, so cool with that. All right. But yeah, do you have more questions? Tangents are the best. I mean, that's what most of my stream usually is. It's just random jibber jabber about whatever. Oh, this test is still here. Good. I thought I had lost this test, so it's good to see that it's still there. Music stop? Nope, still going. Oh, I mistyped. Should have been tests. I wish Tox's overhead was a little bit less. But what are you gonna do, I guess? So current value should be none. And minimum should be none also. And excluded should be an empty list. Okay, so we should try and determine the minimum based on the Tox env list, if we can, if that file exists. And next we should try and determine, yeah, from tox.ini if it exists. Tox.ini equals some helper function, adjacent file. Adjacent file. And this won't be perfect because you can actually specify Tox settings in other files as well. Like, I think there's tool Tox? No? Tool Tox. I should know, I'm a maintainer. Tox configuration specification, that sounds like what we want. As far as the configuration format, we only support config parser. There's a plan to add toml soon. Could be in setup.cfg. Requires the content to be under the Tox section. Interesting. Well, I'm not gonna bother parsing this because I don't use that, so. I think this has a chance to crash here, but until it's a problem, I'm just not gonna bother with it. The problem is that tox.ini has a slightly different ini format than setup.cfg because it uses nope, not that. It uses the config parser from, where is it? Vendor, oh here it is. Vendor packages, AnyConfig, which is a different implementation of config parser. It's actually pretty simple. Kind of surprising. Brain dead simple. Yeah. I've heard that before. Often a sign of bugs, but I guess it works. Let's see, envlist equals I have muscle memory type import PDB, and I need to unlearn that and start using breakpoint instead. Did I type out adjacent? AD. Oh, it's file name, not file. We get envlist? We did. Okay. So we're only going to consider M's that start with pi, and I guess have numbers after them. And maybe, so M's can also be like pi27-foo. Or like pi27-123, or like this, I guess. Although I've seen recently people do pi273536, which we're just not gonna support this. We're just gonna do, I guess we'll just do very simple environments. We'll support things like pi27. the nice thing about partition, as opposed to split, is it'll always give you 3 parts, whether or not the dash is in there or not. One of those tricks that I wish I knew earlier in Python. But like if there's no dash there, you'll get 2 empty strings for the other parts. And there's R partition if you want to split from the other side as well. And like R partition versus partition just changes which side the string will stay in if it's not matched. Does this work? It does. It's a little bit cheeky to use string joining on a string, but it treats this as a sequence of small strings, so I guess it works. Minimum equals oh. So I only want to consider this as the minimum if it's less than our current minimum. So if minimum is none or let's see. I should really convert these to tuples, probably. Ooh, this is a long question. Maybe not so much of a question, but hear me out. I'm very interested in PyTest, maybe because it is the only lib I use consistently between different projects. So I try to dive in, learn something new, and of course, if I put in more hours, I will learn more. Once you said answering to how to get into PyTest, the best way I've found is either break something, fix a bug, or step through with a debugger. As for 2, easy bugs are rare, but I started monitoring the issue tracker, and then your comment cuts off. Because Twitch chat is backed by IRC, so there's a limit on message length. So I will wait for the rest of your message. As for 2, easy bugs are rare, but I started monitoring the issue tracker. As for item 3, I stepped through the simplest test run with the debugger and got lost in endless hook noodles of despair. Yeah, so let me show you, like, I feel your pain there. There's a pretty easy way to make that less painful, if I remember how to do it. Have PyTest installed? It does. So I'm just going to modify the PyTest source code because that's the easiest way to put a breakpoint where I want. Packages. Yeah. So it starts with the main function here, which is here. So this is where you have to use the old or the crappy form of PDB. Let's see, Python 3 PDB. It's called ignore. Skip is what I want. So skip will let you skip a specific module. And the module to skip here is Pluggy, which is what implements the plugin system for PyTest. I think this is how you do it. We'll try that.
Clearly not. Oh, because I actually want Python-m PyTest. So what this is doing is this is bypassing the PyTest module entirely. So now we're here. We've stepped into this. Where's the actual start? So I broke the debugger. What? What happened here? Skip model, FN match, norm case. What did I do? Eval compile. So while evaling something, it exploded the debugger. So maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe stepping through isn't a great idea. I swore this was easier last time I tried to do this. How do I debug the debugger? Skipped module. So module name must have been none here. So this must always crash. So there's probably a bug in CPython, so I could probably make a bug report for this. Trying to step into a module without a name. $245. Oh, I need to use the exclude, I guess. Grab this from before. So in theory this should break, if what we saw was before is correct. Well, definitely breaks in Python 2. See if they fixed it in 3.8. Nope. Okay. So we found a bug in CPython. Another day, another bug in CPython. Cool. Let's see if we can find it. PB skip crash name site bugs.python. The type error in all cases. Yeah, we can search for a type error. PDB skip type error. Seems like no. But we can make, you know what, we're gonna derail this stream and make bugs and fix them. Oh, what is my password here? That one? Not a good password? Oh, not a good password. No. No.
Oh, I guess I should upgrade 3.8. Maybe it was fixed in the latest alpha, but we'll try that. We'll try this. We'll try that now again. But I will try it before posting this issue. And I know there's an upgrade to Python 3.8 because I uploaded the package for it. Should upgrade it? Does that upgrade everything? No, but it'll upgrade enough to do what we need to do. Will we drop frames? Oh, that's so slow. Well, we'll just let that do its thing. I can write some more code while it's doing that. Yeah, it's still broken in the latest alpha, which is alpha 2. I guess technically it's in lib. I wonder how the test suite works for PDB. Know anything about Visual Basic? That was actually one of the very first languages I wrote. Although back then it was VB6, so it was before it had types and nice things. But yes, I know a little bit about Visual Basic. I haven't written any of it in a long time, and if I'm gonna write .NET, usually I'll write C# instead. Why do you ask? Merge that later, and I can make a release. Close some of these tabs. Not gonna lie, it's for a game trainer, but Crazy Taxi personal use. I mean, you might as well use C# if you're gonna be stuck in, I don't want to say stuck in .NET land, but, because C# is actually really nice. But I would write C# instead of Visual Basic if given the choice. And they compile down to basically the same code anyway. What is this issue? 36130. 36130. Where did I type that? Somewhere. I code in C++, but this is for someone. Oh, I see. Well, I mean, C# would be much easier for you if you have C++ background. So this is gonna build. We're gonna let it build in the background because otherwise I drop frames from this wall of text. Also doesn't compress well for YouTube, so we're gonna skip over that. So what? Oh, here's where I typed it. I see. So I'm gonna switch back to this a little bit and switch these from strings to tuple of ints. Or I guess int star. The issue is I need a hotkey to increment a value instead of making it set a value. Wouldn't you just use... I mean, isn't there a plus equals operator? Yes, I did get a haircut. Thank you for noticing. Let's see. Visual Basic increment operators. I mean, worst case, you can read the value and just add. But I think whole purpose of the .NET framework. You're not allowed to use the following in VB. I guess you use plus equals 1. May I share the code setup supermodel? Sure, share your code. I'll see what I can do. So this should convert it to a tuple of integers and then compare it against the minimum, or if minimum is none, and then set it. So I'm gonna step through this with my test case that I had. But just to mix it up a little bit, I'm gonna switch the order of the... Thank you, ColorRed2020, for following. Every follow counts. What was I saying? I was going to switch up the order of these so that I can see the logic work. Let's see. And yeah, you can share links in chat. Everyone should be able to. If you want a Pastebin service, this one is pretty nice. I use it for all of my Pastebin uses. Oh shoot, I closed chat. That's not the keyword shortcut I wanted. So hang on, don't say thanks. Okay, now you can say thanks. I used the wrong keyboard shortcut. I meant to close this tab, but instead I closed chat. I must not have clicked fast enough. Okay. You can talk again. Why? Will I lose my mind? Is this done building? It is. Is this the... No. Where did I make that test file? Is it here? Yeah, it is. Am I familiar with CMake? I've used it once or twice. I've fixed a CMake build, but I am much more familiar with just vanilla make. So I guess the answer is no. So this patch fixes the bug, but I should really figure out how to test it first. Here's the code. All right. Oh boy. You've sent me a screenshot of the code. Do you want to send it in text so it's a little bit easier to see, maybe? I guess I can put it up over here. I just need someone to explain to me how to include an external library to the project. Here's the code though. Oh, so this is where you're setting the value and you want to increment instead? Ooh. Is right integer just like the string conversion? Oh, is that just like write it to an arbitrary memory address? Wait, how does... Where does right integer come from? I guess is my first question. This function looks similar to the signature we have here. So, oh, read writing memory. Yes. So in theory, what you would need to do. Wait, are you? Oh, I see. Do you want to like give me the code you have here so that I can actually figure out what this is doing? Send me the code in text so that I can actually click around in it. Yeah, I'm curious to see how your functions work, and then it should be pretty easy to like grab, like what you'll end up doing is grabbing the value out of memory and then doing whatever modification you need to it and then writing it back. In theory. Run test. What the hell is this? Oh, here we go. Test skip with no name module. Is what I need? I don't know. don't know how this function is actually supposed to work. Yes, reading the address from the game and then letting you write a value to it. Okay, so this should be a more complete paste. Oh, this doesn't have your other code though. Can you send me the whatever that file was on the far right hand side? Because in theory you'll also have like a read integer function. Yeah, that file. It might be long, but I think I'll need that. Hi Anthony, are you a genius? Also, is open source Python something that you enjoy much? It seems like you spend a lot of time doing it. I don't know that I'll answer the first question. I'll leave that up to interpretation. I do like working on open source Python. It's one of the things that brings me joy, I guess. As I spend a bunch of my free time doing it and get basically nothing out of it. Yeah, I do enjoy it. I don't necessarily enjoy trying to figure out what this test is doing, but I do want to figure this out. Let's see. Okay, so this is the other file with a lot of... Oh, there's no indentation. Please code highlight it. Oh, it did, thank goodness. Read, process, memory. Yeah, so you should be able to use read integer. Read integer, process name, address, and size. But defaulting to 4. So yeah, you should be able to use, let's see, you had your original code here. No, I picked that again. Oh, I wanted to edit this anyway. Copy and edit. So one of these functions where you're doing your writing here, you should be able to do basically try like dim, it's been a while, something like that, I don't know. X equals read integers ct3 and then this memory address etch. And stick this code in here. But I'll be honest, it's been a while since I've written VB. So oh, this takes a string though? That seems weird. I have this open here, write integer. Value as integer. Yeah, that should be fine then. And you should be able to just do x plus 1 here. So something like this, I think. I'll let I'll let you fix the actual type problems here because I don't remember the syntax so well. But that should get you close to what you want. Should just be read a value and then write out that same value. In theory. Hope that helps. So it writes out a file, and then okay. I'm forgetting what my test name is. No name module. So we create the modules, and then we run a tracer over an import. Okay, so I think we need a bunch of these. And then just to match whatever the values are in here. Maybe I need to put it in a main function like this does up here, and that's what's wrong here. Try that. No, not at all. What if I copy this in here? Do I use Python at work? Yes, I do use lots of Python at work. At Lyft, probably about 70% of our services are Python. The number keeps getting smaller and smaller every time I say this, I guess. But there's a lot of Go and JavaScript as well. Although most of the stuff that I work on is in Python. What the fuck? Why is this different now? I guess there's supposed to be one event here. Tracer has no attribute set call. What? Clearly this is not the right way to test this. Tfunc main, what is this? I wonder if skip is used anywhere else in here. Seems not. Okay, so it has to contain a main function, so that's at least that bit down. Like, what I want this to do is step in and crash. At item 1, expected line. May I ask your opinion about Go? There's a lot of hype around it right now, and I'm wondering if I should focus on Node.js or Go. So there are a lot of parts of Go that I really like. So I like that it compiles very fast. I like that it has a type checker. And it seems like a pretty performant language, and it's relatively low level and optimized for speed and safety. There's a lot of things that I don't like about Go, though. Like, I really don't... Well, and this is getting better. The packaging situation in Go is kind of a mess. Like, everything is a Git module, and there's no version freezing without inventing a naming scheme of modules and domain names and all that stuff. So that part's kind of annoying. But, of course, like, the Go vendoring experiment or the new packaging stuff, Go packages, solves that to a pretty good extent. The lack of generics is pretty frustrating in Go. So, like, you look at the Go sort module, you have, like, sort.float64, sort.ints, sort.strings, sort.etc. And in theory, like, you would just... Well, in most other languages that have slightly higher level type systems, you would have a single sort function, and then it would sort anything that could compare, for instance. But with, like, templates or generics, like, that would be trivially solved. But instead, you define a whole new function every time you change the type. It's kind of annoying. So I don't like that aspect of it. My favorite part of Go is the idea that code is a first-class citizen. It's like, and that rewriting code is part of the language itself. Because that makes, like, rewriting tools such as, like, Go format really powerful and really easy to work with. So I really like that aspect of it. But yeah, Go is a good language. I don't want to say that it's bad. I've written some Go myself. Not much that's public. Let's see, setup tools, Golang. So my first project was to try and get Go and CPython to talk to each other. I don't want to edit that. What are you doing? So I wrote this tool called setup tools Golang, which lets you package Go modules in Python. And so you can, like, this is how you would package a C extension in Python. But you can actually write one in Go, and it works pretty well. And here's some examples. So, like, this is just a very, when you write them, you have to make this little C file that goes next to it, just to expose the APIs to Python. So, little C file that has kind of public APIs for Python. And then you can write Go, and you kind of have to, like, unmarshal the Python objects a little bit, but you can pass directly into Go functions, and it works. In fact, I can show you working. Setup tools, Golang, examples. And the other cool thing is, because Go compiles to static binaries, you can redistribute them as many Linux wheels pretty easily. Here's that red function we saw before. And it can color red.red. Yeah, it'll color strings for you, and if you print them, you'll get ASCII red. Thank you, Hexcoder, for following. Every follow counts. Or thank you, H3XC0D3R. I can read Leet, Mom. Look what I can do. But yeah, you can see, like, the red function works. I think there's a module called hello world. What is the module called? It was called hi. it's supposed to be called hello. Maybe I renamed it and set it up high. Hello lib. Import hello lib. Hello lib.oh hi. Oh hi, Anthony. Sometimes I amuse myself more often than I should. But yeah, the original example was this summing function, which takes two numbers and adds them together. But then I wanted to show that importing external libraries work, and so this ANSI library actually comes from some other person's GitHub, and so I wanted to show that worked. But my original goal for building this setup tools Golang project was actually so I could reuse Docker's parser to make a Dockerfile parser. And so it's in pylib, maybe? Yeah. So I made a library that consumes a string or a file name and spits out a parse tree of the, well, not a parse tree, I guess it's just the AST nodes of a Docker file. So I can pip install Dockerfile. And the whole point of this is there's a bunch of Dockerfile parsers online, but they're all like slightly different than the true parser, and there's no spec anywhere. Or maybe there's a spec now, but there wasn't back then. So I made this library, which you can pass it, so like from Ubuntu Bionic run echo oh hi, for instance. Why are you not pretty printing? Or maybe you are, and you just are not very helpful. But anyway, it parses out the string into commands, and each command has like what name it was in the Docker file, and what line number it's on, and the parts of it, and whether it was JSON or not, and sometimes there's subcommands. But my eventual goal, and you'll probably see this pattern a lot with a lot of my projects, is like I wanted to make a linter for Docker files, and so I built all this other cool infrastructure around like making Go work in Python. And then I never went back and wrote a linter, so I did all this work and then didn't actually use it for anything. But maybe someday I'll write a Dockerfile linter, but not today. But it was a fun project, and I learned a ton about like the object model system for Go, as well as like some of I knew a little bit about how the CPython object model worked, but I learned a lot more about how that works as well. Also that like comments are first-class citizen in Go, so like this export comment actually causes this to be a public name. And the reason I had to name it like this was so that Python could call it properly. Because I wanted to expose Python names, not Go names. Because Go names are camel case and Python names are snake case. But I don't know, it was kind of a cool project. Code's pretty ugly because it's essentially like writing CPython, but talking through the Go API for these parts here. But it works pretty well. But yeah, that's my long-winded opinion about Go. Yeah, no problem. Happy to try and answer that. Extend BDB to enhance test coverage. I guess I could just grab this. What's my original stack trace? frame is skipped module. Stop here. Libbdb. Stop here. Okay, so in theory I could just grab a frame and do it this way. Although, how am I going to get a frame object? This might be a way to steal a frame. tb frame dot f globals name. Dang it, that one has a frame. Try this instead, maybe? Okay, so that has a name. That's none. What is the exception? Let's use value error instead. Maybe it's catching it for some other reasons. Oh, here we go. Okay, so that frame has no name. So can we just get it down to this now? Okay. So, in theory that's a way to do it with stop here. So I'm gonna try that instead. I'm in the wrong tab. exec with so we need to do the same thing. adb dot, what's the name of the function? I forget. Stop here. tb.tbnext.tbframe. I don't know if it's supposed to be true or false. Hey, we got our crash now. That's good. That's a... delete that real quick. What'd you paste in here? Yeah, I paste random. At least it's not your password. Could be worse. Nice. Okay, so fortunately I have reproduced this crash, which was good. I was here to ask how to use Python commands like if and tkinter. I've done a little bit of tkinter, so I can maybe answer that. But it should work just like normal. Although tkinter, since it's a GUI framework, you have a little bit of different stuff going on. Like you'll have your graphical pieces and like callbacks with buttons and stuff. I think it's been a long time since I worked with TK. ADB object has no attribute stop frame. What does that mean? What's up, Adam Fighter 10101? Yeah, go ahead and paste it. Oh boy. Here, use this to paste it. That way I can get indentation. And that way all the code will fit because it's chat. Dot frame equals. Yeah, that works better. Okay. I guess I can just run this, right? Looks benign. Yeah, it's just a run random code from the internet. I don't have TK installed, but I can install it real quickly. Oh, it's gonna drop frames. Are we gonna drop frames? Probably gonna drop frames. Oh, didn't drop any. Oh, of course, I don't have your photo, so I will just pick a random photo from the internet. Here's a nice image. Or this one. God, stop, go away. Can't paste. Alright, well, I'm gonna run it without the background image. I can figure out where this window went. Ah! It does show up at least. And then it crashes. So the basic idea with tkinter, if I remember correctly, is you want to register callbacks on buttons. So you want some sort of button in there. Button b.bind. So you want something like the entry Python 3 tkinter. How do I make a button? Combo box, spin box, progress bar, tree view. Just want basics. Oh, tk.button. So is your TK object? That sounds fine. Should be able to just make a button. So this should get us a button. We do have a button now. And you won't have this as much happening down here, because you'll have to write your callbacks as functions. So def button click. Command. Button command equals button click. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm making this up as I'm going along. So this should just print to the console here. But then we'll make it like do something with this here, but you can see here when I click the hi button, it puts hi here. So now what we would need to do is make it take into account this question here, and then print out, or like modify a label to produce these messages here. So like here's where you could put in if statements and such. So let's just steal yours here. And then we want to display these somewhere, so we should, I mean, we can do it with printing, but we could also, like, the way you would want to do it is apply it to a label inside of your view. But right now, when we press the button, we should get some sort of random answer over here. You can see when we're clicking this, we get output over there. So that's something. Let's make another. Let's make another label below and. So the thing with tkinter is the last function, or tk, the last function that you ever want is your main loop, and you won't ever run any code after that usually. Unless you're using TK as just like an interactive bit in your otherwise programmatic program. So I'm going to add another label, but lower. Let's put this at 50. Label 2. Label 2. Put that at 275. I think I can just do this. Really sense how my API would work. Let's see if that works. Okay, kind of. I kind of screwed that up. So, should be able to. Okay, so there's an invisible, well, not so invisible label hanging out there. Let's put it further down. But what we can do up here is instead of print, we can do label to text equals. And then just get rid of these parentheses here. So now when we click this button, we get text down here. So it kind of works now. And I assume you can take it further from there. Yeah, I'll paste it to you. No, I wrote it all, and now I'm gonna keep it hostage forever. No, I'll give you this code. That'd be so mean if I just like wrote this and then just didn't give it to you. I'm not mean like that, usually. Yeah, hopefully that helps you, or like takes you in the right direction. It doesn't quite implement everything for you, but it does help you. Have I ever built a remote control plane? That's pretty specific question. Let's see. I know I had remote control planes as a kid, but I don't think I ever built one. Yeah, I can't say I ever built one. What's the console that I'm using? So I have a virtual machine. So normally I run Windows. So there's my Windows background, or like 1/10 of it, or 1/3 of it, I guess. But I'm running Ubuntu, which is a Linux operating system. Ubuntu, which is one of the most popular, if not the most popular, Linux distribution. Thank you, Now, for following. Every follow counts. So Ubuntu is a Linux distribution. It's the one that I happen to know really well, so I tend to use it. And then this is just the default GNOME, GNOME, the GNOME terminal. GNOME terminal. Which is just the default terminal that ships with Ubuntu. But if you want the color scheme, I happen to have that, or at least part of it. Where's that? Pigments, PyTest. The G is silent. It's GNOME. Yeah, I know. I just like to say that because GNU can be pronounced GNU, and it sounds silly. I'm trying to figure out how to have a Pi fly an RC plane and have an override for the controller. That sounds like a really cool project. Unfortunately, I don't have any advice for you because my only programming on embedded devices was reverse engineering and hacking a thing called an iClicker. So this is the iClicker. This is kind of the one that I hacked on. It's a like student remote control submission thing, but I like reverse engineered the hardware and wrote software for it. But that's not super helpful for like trying to target normal devices that have programming APIs. I hope to do a hardware project sometime again, but I haven't in a long time, so I don't know when that'll ever happen. I guess my other hardware project that I was planning to work on is I have one of these, which if you've ever been in a lift, there's one of these on the dashboard. But I work at Lyft, and occasionally drivers send back... Aw, dang it, it's not set on my desk properly anymore. Anyway. Sometimes drivers send back faulty devices or what they consider faulty devices, and then the engineers kind of get the leftover ones. But this one was fully sealed, and so I assume it completely works, but so someone couldn't figure out how to use it, so I got it instead. But yeah, I plan to write some code on it. Unfortunately, the only parts that are programmable on it are the there's a 4x20 LED screen on the back, so you can write text, and that's about it. And then the front has colored LEDs, so you can make color patterns. But I don't know. I was planning to write some software for it and maybe write a crappy SDK for it, while not looking at the SDK that Lyft has, because then I'd be open sourcing proprietary software. I would mostly want to just reverse engineer it myself. That way it could be open source, and then anyone... Well, maybe that's a bad idea, because then anyone could use Lyft branded hardware for whatever they want to do. So maybe that's not a good idea. Never mind. Please don't sue me. But yeah. Oh, I don't know how to do this. Set trace, maybe? I keep getting invalid syntax on the code that I sent you. I assume this was valid syntax. Did I do anything cheeky here? Line 35. Oh, you'll want to remove this here to get it back to what it was before. I was just temporarily commenting out stuff so that I could make the code work without what am I trying to say? I removed that in the arrows between the photo and parentheses. So right here, there's an issue. paste your code again. Paste your code again. And I'll find the syntax error for you. It's probably just like a stray parenthesis somewhere. But after a while, you'll get good at finding syntax errors. Sometimes the parser points like at a kind of irrelevant place, which is unfortunate. PyPy is a little bit better about that, but CPython is not so good. Paste that again. Yeah, so you have to remove this parenthesis right here. And then that'll fix it. Hopefully that fixes for you. So this parenthesis. Damn, I missed that. What? Yeah, sometimes it takes a second set of eyes to find really obvious stuff, but it's fine. I won't fault you. Why was it at the end then? Yeah. That's so the Python parser is kind of tricky. So you basically had this t3.py. We're incrementing a bunch here. So you basically had like x equals foo bar and baz. So if you were to comment this out, this is actually valid syntax in Python. And what this means is it's a tuple where the first element is this and the second element is this, which, I don't know, a lot of people consider this to be kind of a wart in the syntax, like a bad idea. And so the way Python tokenizes, it says, okay, this is a name token, there's some white space here, then there's an operator, then there's white space, etc. It keeps going. It pushes a parenthesis onto the parenthesis stack, so it's like one deep there. Then it finds the closing parenthesis, so it removes that, then it continues on. And then only when it hits this parenthesis here does it notice like, hey, I don't have an open parenthesis for this, so this is a problem, I must be done, and then it points the exception message there. So there's a good reason for it, but it's unfortunate. So you essentially get this here. Although, if I remember right, PyPy gives a better error message. Oh, well, it's a slightly better error message when it says, like, unmatched parenthesis. It'll also do things for, like, so if you have an extra open parenthesis, t3.py. So CPython will give you this kind of useless message where it's like unexpected end of file. But if I remember right, yeah, PyPy 3 tells you exactly like, hey, this parenthesis never has a closed parenthesis. So like, this is a way better error message than this, but unfortunately it hasn't made it into CPython yet. Dang, are you a snake charmer? Maybe. Line 42, attribute error. Let me open this up again. What was line 42? Is that me trying to be sneaky again? Oh, this. Yeah, you can just delete this line. I forgot to delete it when wait, none type has no attribute place. I don't remember. This line that I've highlighted is line 42. You should be able to just delete this line. It was left over from before I made this change. I just, when I sent you the code, I had it commented out, and I should have just deleted this line before I sent it to you. That's my bad. Got it working, just going to improve it. Nice, cool. Can you give some recommendations / tips for open source contributing? Yeah, sure. I guess I'll talk about like how I got into open source and then how I continue to do it or find it interesting, I guess. At first I was like super intimidated by open source because it's like, what if people hate my code, or like what if people don't want my contributions, or like what if, I don't know, what if I'm wrong is probably the biggest one that held me back from trying to work on open source. But the way I got started was, and like the easiest way to get started is just to report bugs to people and get really good at reporting bugs. But that's not the fun part of open source, in my opinion. The fun part is like making changes and improving stuff, or like building new tools and making it better for other people. I always find the problem/issues super vague, and I feel like I don't know what half of the issues mean. How do you know the best solution? I don't know. There isn't a good answer for that. I actually think a lot of the times that like you can't really find the best solution to things, and like sometimes like most issues on GitHub are really crappy and super vague. Occasionally you'll get a good issue where somebody has like found an issue and told you all the information that you need to know to solve the problem, and it's like pretty straightforward to figure it out and find a fix for it. But most of the time you're in the gray area where it's like some weird interaction with some weird thing and you have to guess at what's wrong. Turns into philosophy and my code not getting merged, but oh well. Yeah, I feel you there. Sometimes contributing to other people's projects is frustrating because they'll want things a certain way, and you might either not agree with them or not have the time to fix it, and like that part can be pretty degrading. But in my mind, like the easiest way to start in open source is to find either like small problems or like starter tickets. So one of the projects that I maintain that has a lot of issues has a specific issue label for like easy to start with, like new contributor happy, or not happy, new contributor friendly issues. And a lot of these end up being just be like, figure out how something works and write documentation for it. Or like this one is pretty easy. Like when you detect that a function is not a synchronous function, like raise or show a warning for it. And like often projects that you use every day will have issue trackers with easy issues in them. Sometimes they won't, but a lot of them do, and that's like a pretty easy way to get started. Can you talk about Python not allowing for access modifiers and why that shouldn't be scary? People at work always crap on me, but we also use C#. And actually, that's a good point. And honestly, when I started working in Python, that was the first thing that terrified me about Python, is that, oh, there isn't a way to implement encapsulation, and so like everything is kind of public. It isn't strictly true. There are ways to actually hide data in Python. Let me show you a terrible hack that implements that. Scratch wiki. So you can make true private variables via Clojure. I'll skip the punchline there. There's a kind of sketchy punchline to this. So we can make a variable called oneTruePrivate, and all we can call, well, I'll show you in a sec. Python-i, python3-i t4.py. So we have x, which is this oneTruePrivate thing, and it has only two things on it, so we can look at x.val, which is the value, and we can increment it. And if we look at x.val again, it's 2. But if we try and assign to x.val, we can't set it. And in fact, if we look at the state of x, there's no state here. And so what's actually happening, if we look at this code here, there's this variable that's held in a function scope, and when we return this object, it has access to this function scope, but nothing else can really write to that. So you can get private variables. I'm on a tangent, but I'll bring it back and answer your question in a second. Would you actually do this? No. You would never do this. There's no good reason to do this. But you can do some terrible things. Cell equals x dot increment dot func dot closure 0. You can do some terrible things to mutate the value, and it works. Like so technically it's still not private because you can modify it by hacking at it with the C API. But anyway, back to the actual question, like, is it scary that Python doesn't have access modifiers? In some ways, yes, but it also gives you a lot more freedom in a way. So Python doesn't truly have access modifiers, but there are conventions around what's public and private. So in a class, you might have like some public function, and it would be denoted public by not starting with an underscore. And you might have some like private function where you would start it with an underscore. And this is just to say, like, hey, conventionally this method is not to be called by external callers. And you can even have a double underscore, which has a special meaning in Python. So if we look at the parts of C, so we have this foo function that we define here, we have bar here, and Baz actually gets rewritten in a special way because it has 2 underscores. And so it participates in a concept that's called name mangling, where an underscore and then the class name are put in front of it. And this is really, like, it doesn't actually make things private, but it's intended to make it so there isn't namespace collisions inside of inheritance. Thank you, Code Alate, for following. Every follow counts. Like, this, in my mind, is reserved for like very special cases where you have inheritance trees and you want to make sure that you don't collide with someone else's function name. But these two naming schemes are pretty common and conventional. That said, there's no guarantees about whether an underscored function is public or private, and anyone can really just call this function if they wanted to. And so often you can lose guarantees about state and stuff. That said, I think like moving from a language like C# to Python, the scarier part of Python is that you don't have types, and you don't have a type checker, and you don't have a compiler. I mean, you have a compiler, but your compiler does not do static type checking. And languages like C# and Java and C++ and stuff give you much stronger guarantees about what the types of your variables are, and like what you'll experience both at compile time and at runtime. And in Python, it's kind of just like, here's a string, here's an object, grab an attribute, hope it's a function, and then call it, which is terrifying. But fortunately, in like the latest versions of Python, you can use type annotations, and these are like, they're essentially special comments that you can use an external tool to check them all and make sure that they line up, which gives some better guarantees. It's still like not a perfect safeguard, and like the type checkers still aren't great. They're pretty good, but they aren't like perfect. But it's a better guarantee than nothing. How do I move the image? That's a good question. This is what we were looking at last time. Let's see, configure background photo image. Label. Okay, so it seems like the image is attached to the label itself, and so you would need to like offset this somehow. I think you would probably use this same like place function, but call it on the label instead. I don't really know. I haven't worked enough with TK to know how to adjust the position of that, but that would be my guess. How did you go from having an intermediate but not really solid skill level that's more hacky to writing solid, more robust code? Oof. That's assuming that I don't just write hacky code. I think like probably the best answer, but probably not a great answer to that, is just like well, it's like a combination of things. Like one, obviously practice. Like you need lots of practice, like to continually improve skills and like learn new things. And like that involves like working on a bunch of unrelated stuff or like trying new stuff or things like that. Another way that I think people get a lot better about writing code is by either watching other people write code or like doing a lot of code review. I think, and like not just doing code review, but having other people code review your code. So I think I improved the most in my coding ventures while working with others at Yelp. And so like getting lots of code reviews and giving lots of code reviews. So like seeing how other people do stuff and getting advice from other people on how to do stuff. And I think that helped solidify like best practices more than anything else. Yeah, hopefully that answers your question. I still think some of my code is pretty hacky, but and I'm sure like if I look at some of the code that I write today in a year, I'll be like, what the hell is this? What idiot wrote this? Oh wait, it's me. But I think that'll always happen with code. What do I do for work? So I work at I work as a infrastructure software engineer at a company called Lyft. You might have heard of it. They're, I'll use the term loosely, but a ride-sharing company. Oh, that's cool. I guess I've never clicked on our website before, but you might have heard of it. So I used to work at Yelp. I was there for 5 years, and before Yelp, I was at an enterprise software company. I started as a web developer at Yelp. I moved into more of like full stack, and then eventually to infrastructure engineering, where I was building web frameworks and developer tooling for stuff. And then when I left Yelp, I was like, I really like developer tooling, so I'm going to try and continue to do that. And then continue to do developer tooling at Lyft. I started on a team called Provisioning. The responsibilities of Provisioning were to make sure that the production environment continued to function, but also make sure that the development environment was still functional. And eventually Provisioning grew, thank goodness, because we were like 4 people dealing with 400 engineers. And that was just like, we were basically like fighting fires constantly because we were 4 people. It was like 100-to-1 ratio of people that have problems to people that are solving problems, and it didn't work well. But then Provisioning grew by a bunch of people and split into a bunch of different teams, and so now I'm a lead on a team called Developer Experience, and so now I mostly focus on developer tools. And so that's a little bit about my job. Is that the Uber for Uber? Yeah. Yes, that is one way to put it. Can we know why you left? Yeah, it was a lot of complicated reasons. The biggest reason was I was just there for way too long. The average, somewhere, I'm making this number up, but it's pretty close to the right number. The average like tenure of a software engineer in Silicon Valley is somewhere around like 1.5 years, and to stay at a place for 5 years is incredibly rare. most of the reason I stayed for so long was because I was lazy. It's a lot of work to look for a job. Even if you have lots of job offers, like it's still like interviewing is such a taxing process, and it's exhausting. But some of the reasons I left, the internal structure at Yelp was becoming much more corporate, and so some of the things that worked when Yelp had 100 engineers or 115, which is when I joined, were no longer like culturally okay as Yelp grew to, I don't know, I think it was around like 600 or 700 engineers when I left. And some of those things were like, our security team became very, very aggressive about locking down computers. And that might sound like a good thing, but when locking down computers interferes with getting my job done, that's super stressful and like a huge pain in the ass. Like one of my favorite stories is I was a pushmaster at Yelp, so that meant that I would deploy Yelp.com all the time. And one of the responsibilities of a pushmaster is you press a button and it starts deploying the code, and you have to keep this program running that makes sure that the code ends up on the machines. And in the middle of deploying, IT/security decided that they needed to push a security update, and so they pushed the security update and my computer restarted while I was deploying the website. And at the time, the deploy software was not super robust, and so if you interrupted it while it was deploying, this brought the site down. And so a security push from IT basically brought Yelp.com down, which was pretty bad. But the thing that personally impacted me is I like to program in Linux, and so like as you see when I stream, I'm working in a Linux, or I'm working in GNOME terminal on Ubuntu, which is Linux. And at work, I was running Linux on my laptop, which gave me the tools that I liked, and I don't know, the freedom to install the software that I needed to get my job done. And IT was like, well, we don't want to support Linux because we think you're a hacker and blah, 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 and it's not secure, and all this like fear, uncertainty, and doubt that was just like completely unfounded. And like, God forbid if we told them, hey guys, we run like 2,000 Linux servers in production. Like, just watch the look on their face, like, oh no, the Linux. But they were basically like, yeah, sorry, you can't run Linux anymore. And I was like, well, that's fine. I'll find somewhere else to work that lets me run Linux. So I peaced out. So that was another reason I left. So like, change of scenery was one of them. Was there too long, another one. Couldn't run Linux was another one. There was also some like internal politics that I wasn't super privy to. I won't go into details there, and that was mostly like conflicts and stuff. But oh my god, interviewing is such a pain in the ass. Yeah, no kidding. When I did my job search after leaving Yelp, which, pro tip, if you're gonna leave a company, get a job first, then leave the company. Don't do what I did. Leaving first and then like trying to find a job, you have much less leverage about like finding a better place to work. I got incredibly lucky with my job at Lyft, with my job offer, but I would have been in a much better place if I could have said like, yeah, well, my employer is giving me this right now, can you beat that, and like leverage that in that way. But yeah, don't leave your job first. Don't do like I did. But yeah, interviewing is a super pain. There was a stretch of like, I think it was 2.5 weeks where I did 43 interviews. And I was dead exhausted after all that, because it was essentially just like constant talking at strangers and having them ask you the same difficult questions over and over, and like working through silly programming problems for not necessarily a good idea, or good ideas, or good thought, or whatever. And like, I can't tell you how many times I had to design a chessboard or design a hotel scheduling algorithm, and it's just like, ugh. If I don't have to think about chess or hotels for another 6 months, I'll be much happier. But eventually got through it. It was pretty good. I have a lot of interest in containers/DevOps, but those are often weird jobs. So to be honest, a lot of my job is actually containers and DevOps. Like, Lyft runs 2 different types of infrastructure that are based on Docker or OCI containers. And so, like, most of the conventions that Lyft has for building Docker containers are stuff that I designed. Or I was like, hey, we should build containers this way because it'll make it faster and smaller and better, and then I made it happen. But like, I don't know, in like modern companies, you can get containers DevOps pretty much everywhere. How was Lyft's interview process? It was pretty standard. It starts with well, I'll just describe how it goes. So at first you talk with a recruiter. They're mostly there to like gauge your interest in the company and like what sort of teams you might want to work on, and kind of get like basic background and like make sure you're not a serial killer, if they can figure that out. After you talk to a recruiter, you'll usually have one phone screen with an engineer where they'll ask you basically a silly programming question that you'll do in CoderPad. So CoderPad is kind of like an online... why does it default to Python 2? What year is this? Yeah, sure, shush. I know how to use this. So they'll ask you a question in CoderPad, so you'll like write some code in here. And the nice thing about CoderPad is you can just like run it directly and see the output over here. And so this is kind of nice because like your interviewer and you at the same time will be typing on this. What is going on here? Like a graphical glitch there. Anyway, but you'll type at the same time as your interviewer, and so you can kind of like collaboratively work on this document. So that's the phone screen portion. Then you'll move to an on-site portion where you'll have, it's usually 2, 3, 4 or 5 interviews. 2 of them, well, I guess it depends on what you're interviewing for. So for like entry-level software engineer, you'll have a short coding interview, then you'll have a laptop interview where, or sorry, a short coding interview where you're like given a question and a whiteboard and you kind of whiteboard a problem. I don't know if we do those anymore because I haven't done that type of interview in a long time. Because I'm an interviewer now, so I interview other people. I don't know if that whiteboard coding problem actually happens anymore. Then there's also a laptop question, which is actually my favorite one to ask because it's probably the easiest one and the most objective of the interview types. Basically, we give the candidate a silly programming problem and they can work on their own laptop and with their own tools and find a solution to the problem. And the interviewer will kind of like help them through the thought process there and like give them hints and stuff. And I really like that one because it's very cut and dry, like either they pass it or they don't. And then there's usually 2 design and architecture problems where, again, it's like figure out how you would design a hotel and like what sort of systems you would have behind it. Although we don't use the hotel question. I can't actually tell you what questions we use, but they're a little bit more interesting. And some of them are like applicable to Lyft. Like the one that I was asked was about how I would do like a routing engine for something. But yeah, there's 2 design questions. I kind of dislike asking the design questions because they're very hard to judge people accurately, I think. Like, sometimes you'll get candidates where you're like, okay, you're stellar, like you know your stuff, and like your design touched on every point that I thought was important, and like sometimes you'll get candidates that are great. But other times you'll get like the borderline candidates where it's like, I don't know whether they know or don't know, and it's kind of awkward. And then there's one last interview where it's called the like experience interview, where you talk with a manager-like person, and they kind of gauge your like, you know, leveling, interest, personal skills, that sort of stuff. I don't know very much about that interview because I don't. By that point, I was just like, I'm so done. Like, I just want to go home now. It's been 5 hours of talking at people, and I don't do that interview type, so I don't know enough about it. But that's how that goes. How do you, as an engineer slash, well, hopefully that answered your question. How do you, as an engineer slash team lead, manage packages and dependencies with code to make sure devs use the same things slash the code will build? Ooh, so depending on the language, that's kind of a different problem for different places. I can tell you how we do it for Lyft, for the various languages that I'm involved in. So obviously the first step is to start with version control. So we use GitHub at Lyft, and we have lots and lots of repositories on GitHub. These are the top 4 that I contribute to. So the next part of that is, at least for Lyft's development, we use Docker and containers for all of development. And so the way we have containers is they're versioned based on the Git revision. Lyft does have some open source, but not not these. This little lock button means that they're closed source. So each individual code compartment, we call them manifested things. We don't have a good name for it. At Lyft, they are things that have a manifest.yaml file. But those manifest things result in Docker images being built for them, and those get versioned based on the Git revision. So you're always downloading the exact same bytes for that container. But that still doesn't necessarily give you deterministic builds for everything. You still need all of the code that you're installing inside the container to be deterministic. And so for Python, what we use is a tool called piptools. And what piptools does is you basically specify your top-level dependencies in a file called requirements.in. Then you run a command. On this diagram, it's pipcompile. We have a custom version of pipcompile that does a couple of special things that Lyft needs. And then that ends up being a requirements.txt file, which ends up with basically a bunch of versions with equals in them. So you're pinning everything. And then hopefully when you run pip install against a bunch of pin things, you end up with the same bytes at the end. It doesn't always work out that way, but in theory, that's how it should work. And so that's how we lock down requirements for applications for Python. For Node, we take the same approach that most open source things do, which is to use the package lock, package.json.lock, package lock.json, I don't know, whatever it is, the lock file for package.json. For Go, we use Glide, which is, I don't want to just search Glide. Glide Golang, there we go. Which is kind of deprecated, but it still kind of works. But Glide is a way to make a lock file that basically locks Git repositories at a specific revision. And so that ensures some amount of repeatable builds. But that's how we try. Like, we try and keep things as pinned as much as possible wherever we can. Dang, 43 in 2 weeks. That's impressive. Yeah, I was dead after that. How do you move an image in tkinter? I was AFK, so I don't know if you answered. I don't know. I don't know the answer. I guessed at it, but I don't know. Where was that tab? This tab? No, this tab. Yeah, so the question was like, how do you move this photo image? I don't know the answer to that. Photo image, background, position, T enter. One simple method is to use place. Oh, this seems to be what you want. So try this maybe. Thank you, Goombak, for following. Every follow counts. Let's see, how would you design an ATM? No, I refuse. Man7 namespaces. This is how Docker is made. Yes, or at least parts of Docker use namespaces. That's correct. Yes. Do you always / more often than not always use a base image for containers? So at Lyft, the way we set up our hierarchy is it's probably easiest if I draw it. So at the top we have like Ubuntu Bionic. We also have Ubuntu Trusty, which is 10.0 or 14.04. Fortunately, it's not 10.04. Yelp was 10.04 for way too long. Oh, this is 18.04. And these are kind of the like. Thank you, AstroTurf Prime, for following. Every follow counts. Let's see. Let me get a brush here. Brushy brush. So this is kind of the like the public. That's not how you write a U. So this is like public images. And so Lyft draws kind of a boundary between public images and private images. And then from each of these, we produce a second level down. So we want to change the color now. So from Bionic, we have Lyft / Bionic base, which has a specific, the ... here is basically a Git revision of the Bionic base manifest. And we also have Lyft / image base. This one is not very well named, but Bionic base comes from Bionic and image base comes from Trusty. And then from there we have another set of like lower images below here. So for instance, one of them is Lyft / Python, which actually comes from image base. Which kind of shows like this is an image that's useful for building Python images. In the newer world, we're using a technology called source to image. Which the idea behind source to image is you kind of set up your repository in a very specific way. You don't write any Docker files at all. You just set up your code in a specific way. So like for a Python repository, you would have, I don't know, your application at like app, and you'd have a requirements.txt file for your dependencies. And then you would say S2I builder, build for me. And it would say, oh, I noticed you're a Python application. I'm gonna install a virtual env and make sure Python is there and set up all the stuff you need to run a Python app. And so that's kind of how our modern images work at Lyft. And so for those we have S2I base, which is a helper that makes building images easier. That one's not super interesting. But then from S2I base, we have a couple builders. So one of them is the Lyft / S2I Python 3 for building like a Python 3 application. We also have Lyft / S2I Go CLI for building Go applications. And you kind of end up with a tree like this. But the like point that I want to make here is we try and keep the bits that we pull from the public internet as cordoned off as possible. And so like we're really only using the very basic images from Docker Hub. And for those, we audit them once a week when we pull them in, make sure that there isn't something sketchy coming in. What's the average container size running, say, on Lyft/Python? Because the default Ubuntu image is around 500 after or 500 megabytes after update. Oh, so that's not really true. So the base Ubuntu image for Bionic starts at only 84. Well, it's probably smaller now. Docker pull Ubuntu Bionic. Actually, I won't pull it. But like Ubuntu Bionic starts at pretty small, which is like 85 megs. Now Trusty is big, but that's because Trusty's old. It starts at like 200 megabytes. But this image here, so this like Xenial Dead Snakes, comes from this huge Docker file. Dead Snakes runbooks Docker files Xenial. So like after installing all of these things, it's still only 600 megabytes. So you can make images that are pretty small with just with carefully selecting your dependencies. Now you got me here. Like Lyft/Python happens to be pretty big because this image tree predates when I joined the company, so I didn't have a chance to like slim this down, and now that there's like 100 things that descend from this is a pretty big image. But like Bionic base is less than 100 megabytes. S2I base is right around like 110, 120. And this image is right around like 150-ish. But the important part about Docker images here is not necessarily the size of the base image for us. It's more like how well can we reuse the cache. So like if we have a bunch of images that are all based on the same version of S2I Python 3 and they're all running on the same host, you would only pull down those base layers once and not really worry about it for the rest of the applications. And like either way you have to pull down the application code, so it doesn't like saving bytes there doesn't help so much. How do they code an image? Do they try and mirror virtualenv? So there's kind of a, yeah, writing code in an image is kind of awkward. What we do mostly is we lay out the file system in a specific way. Where's the brush? So like you have like your root here, and then we have a couple of directories here. I'll type those in a second. So the first one is like code/my_app. Actually, let me just do this in a text editor. It's gonna be easier there. So you have the root directory, you have a code directory. We also have a VMs directory, and then like the rest of the file system. And you have your service here. And when they're working on their local machine, this is a hot mount from the host. So like outside of their container, they might run PyCharm or whatever IDE that they want. And we'll mount this code directly into here, and then they can use this virtualenv that's already built into the image to run this code. Now that works for most cases, but some cases you want to like change the dependencies and like make sure that running different libraries work, or like working on a different library that you're pulling into a container works. And so you can also hot mount code for other libraries next to this and then modify this virtualenv. Or you can change the requirements and rebuild either this chunk or the whole image. And it works pretty well. It's not great. Developing in containers is always kind of a pain. So we've built a set of other tools which let developers build virtualenvs directly on their host machines. Hot mounting meaning volume mount. Yes, we use volumes for this. For at least for the local development. For remote development, where we have hosts on EC2 running stuff, we actually rsync code into those containers. And soon we'll be using, in Kubernetes, we'll be using a company called Windmill, I think they're called that. Oh, this is gonna be unsearchable. Container. Docker. Here we go. So we'll probably be using Tilt to manage our remote code synchronization. But Tilt is kind of a nifty app that you modify code locally and it knows how to put it onto your application and restart it or do whatever it needs to do. But our Kubernetes development environment is very much a work in progress right now, and it's most of what my team is working on this half. Play the video. All right, let's see what we've got from Tilt. Okay, so it looks like they're starting some Kubernetes containers. There's no sound, I assume. Otherwise, you would... Wait, is there any sound? No, there's no sound. This is video with no sound. So I don't know what they're showing here, but look, fancy dialogues and stuff. Woo! Crazy the amount of things that you've been able to become familiar with. My company is a strict .NET world, which is fine, I guess. I've learned a lot about that, but goodness, you have seen a lot. Yeah, I also have this problem where I like to try and stick my hands into everything, and like, if I don't understand how something works, I'm gonna go try and figure it out. Which has been good in some regards, but also like not good in others, because like some of the times like it takes away from me doing actual work by finding or by like trying to look into other stuff. Thank you, Adam Fighter 10101 for following. Every follow counts. Oh great, now you can see my terrible YouTube suggestions. So I don't watch any content on my actual YouTube channel. So this is what you get for random suggestions from how to create data entry form in Excel. Great, cool. Although I probably would actually watch this video because I like Pokemon. How easily can you complete Professor Oak's challenge in Pokemon Red and Blue? Well, it's technically impossible without trading, so rip. I'm excited and scared for my first day. Yeah, the first day is always like the most terrifying. Oh yeah, there is a Pokemon announcement tomorrow, but it's at like freaking 6 a.m. Is it Pokemon Direct? What day is it? 2/27. Yeah, so that's tomorrow. But it's at like 6 a.m. Pacific, so ridiculous. I'm not gonna wake up that early. Looks like the next generation is coming out. Yeah, that's probably what's gonna happen. Have you had to solve an algorithm that just murders you? I'm having that now. Not actually murders me, but I was doing Advent of Code, which is a cool programming puzzle thing, and I was streaming this over around Christmas time. But there were some of these that I like. The way these problems are structured is they're kind of word problems that introduce a programming problem and then like give you some hints, and they're kind of cool. They like tell a story and you can try and solve them. But this particular problem, day 23, I did not do well at all with it. It was so the problem description is basically there's a bunch of octahedrons in space, and you have to like find the point where most of them overlap. And so I was just like trying to think about collision detection of octahedrons in 3D space, and like it was just like very, very mind melting, and I did not want to think about this problem. And then the way I ended up solving it was kind of cheating. I ended up using a constraint solver. So Z3 is a it is a theorem prover. But I use this constraint solver to basically just like, well, here's my attempt at doing collision detection in 3D space. This actually works. This implements octahedron collision detection, oddly enough. But like the amount of time that I had to like sit down and like think this out, and I'm sure there's a typo. Well, actually, I know there isn't a typo because I tested it. But this code like almost looks generated, but I typed all of that out, and it was terrible and awful. But this was my attempt at implementing it the right way. And then down here, I was just like, let's use a constraint solver. So you define some variables, you set up all of your constraints, you tell it to model those constraints, and then you just say, hey, what's the answer? And it worked pretty well. But yeah, this was definitely an algorithm that was like mind-bogglingly hard to think about, and also like I just gave up and ended up cheating. So the answer is yes. You use type hints. Yes, I've been getting into typing in Python a lot recently. I think it gives a lot better guarantees about how code's going to run, and like being able to do some amount of static checking before code executes is really powerful. Now, granted, these were silly problems where like literally everything is an int, so it's pretty hard to mess up, but it's definitely useful in more complicated situations. And you can see like I cheated here because like I don't like this has a type, but the type checker doesn't know anything about Z3, so I just didn't bother type annotating the Z3 stuff, or Z3 if you want to Canadianize it. But you know, cool piece of software. Definitely a sneaky way to implement really, really hard problems. Do I stream often? I average about 2 streams a week. I usually stream on Saturday at 1 p.m. Pacific, although I haven't, like, I've been keeping that scheduled for the last couple of weeks, so I think I'm gonna try and like make that an actual scheduled time. As you can tell, my channel is kind of not well designed, I guess. Like, I don't have graphics and stuff, but I plan to like spend some time putting some graphics together and like an offline message that says, hey, come by my stream on Saturday at 1 p.m. Pacific, that sort of thing. But yeah, I stream pretty often, like at least once a week. But I usually don't have a good schedule, but I do announce my streams on Twitter, so if you want to follow me, it is this is my Twitter handle, and I'll usually announce the stream like 1 hour before, so it's not really that great. But yeah, so sometimes often enough, I guess. What do you think about mastering a few programming languages versus experimenting with a lot? So that's a tough one. Because I think like you can get really good at a programming language, and that'll make it so you're good enough at, like, you can get good at concepts to a point where you can pick up any programming language. I think it's good to have one that you're comfortable with, like your kind of go-to language. For me, that's actually changed a lot as I've like moved into different jobs and stuff. Like if you would have asked me in 2009 what my go-to language was, I would have said C#. Like that was what I wrote all my code in, and like even all my like I wanted to figure out a math problem, I would write a small C# program to do that for me. Even if it was like not the best tool for the job. Like nowadays I would probably write a Python program. But if you asked me in like 2012, I would have said C++. And who knows what it'll be next. And even in the case of like Python isn't necessarily my favorite programming language. It just happens to be the one that right now I know really well and I can apply in a lot of other places. But I think like knowing good knowing good concepts is more important than knowing languages. Or like knowing approaches is better than memorizing libraries. Like if you watch me stream, I look up docs all the time. I'm like constantly like opening up Stack Overflow or opening up well, this is the bug that I found, so not that one. But like I'll Google stuff, and like I actually think learning to Google is in a lot of ways better than learning a programming language. That said, you kind of need both. But What do you think is a must-read book for Python? Ooh. Well, here's the awkward thing. I think I've only read one chapter of one book on programming. I guess it's not true. During school, there was this algorithms book. I don't remember what it's called, but it's like super popular. And that one was pretty good. If you're doing like Python stuff, the PyTest book by Brian, I don't remember how to pronounce his name, but this book is really good if you're going to be doing Python stuff. It's basically the PyTest book. That one's pretty good. CLRS, yeah, that's what it's called. Thank you, Mindful Fox. Why so much pressure on interviews when what you said about searching a lot? Interviews suck. Like, they're such a terrible proxy for how well someone is going to do in their day-to-day job. It's like, a lot of the skills that they test in interviews are completely irrelevant to a day-to-day job. It's like, oh yeah, design this system, and then what are you actually doing? It's like, oh, I spent today... Like, literally, what I did today at work. I took code from one code base and copied it to another code base, and then changed the function names a little bit so that it worked in the new code base. And that's literally what I did today. And no part of an interview would have ever been like, yeah, that's totally something that you would be expected to do once in a while, or like, that's gonna be one of your responsibilities. Honestly, the hardest part of my job is answering people's questions in Slack, because we're constant, like, my team is kind of a support team because we maintain the developer environments, so we're always like telling people how, or like people will come to us and they'll be like, it's broken, and we'll be like, okay, let's figure out why it's broken and then fix it. And sometimes it's our fault, sometimes it's their fault, sometimes it's Monday, sometimes it's raining. Sometimes problems fix themselves. I don't know. It's pretty different than how interviewing goes. For Stack Overflow, check out stackprinter.com. What is this? Well, I'm gonna grab a question ID from one of my questions, like this one. What does Stack Printer do? Oh, it literally prints out Stack Overflow. That's cool. Nice. I should have assumed. Nice. How would I design interviews? So that one is kind of tough. I've done like 2 or 3 interviews that I thought were like actually good ideas on paper. So one of them was like, here's a technical spec and a problem, like go implement it. Actually, I think I can show you one of them because it was so long ago that it's probably not a big deal that it's private. Here? No. Maybe, I hope I didn't delete it, because it was still kind of cool. Oh yeah. My GitHub page takes a long time to load now. The GitHub... Netflix. Yes, I can still clone this. Okay, so for Netflix, I had to implement a repo viewer. Oh, come on. Let's just click on it then. I don't know if it still works. Okay, is there a readme? Yes. Setting up the project. Start by setting up a virtual environment. Okay, talks, dev. This will create a virtual env, you can activate this, blah blah blah. Oh, I need an API key. I'll do that off screen in a second once this starts. the easiest way is to do this. Okay, so that's what the key is going to look like once this gets created. All right, I'm going to move this off screen for a sec so I can put a key in there so I can show you this project. That's off screen, right? Yeah, you guys can't see that? Okay, good. Copy a key. Paste it in here. Copy something else on my keyboard. Should be good now. Okay. And then how do I start the project? Tests. Okay, I wrote tests. I wrote tests for an interview. Yeah. How do I start it? Oh, starting via Docker. We're not going to do that. We're just going to start it normally. So this was a project where Netflix was like, hey, here's a tech spec for a problem. Go make a web app for it. And in this case, it was like, like this HTML is going to be awful because I'm not a front-end programmer. But it was like, hey, download some repo data and then make it appear. What is going on here? Oh, it was just like weird artifacts showing up here. Anyway, so it was like make a thing that grabs some organizations and then display them in the browser. And so like here was a repository viewer, so it'd show like repository sorted by the number of stars. So you can see like this is pre-commit. If you click on it, it had to show like commits over time based on like, I don't know, information. And then if you click through this, it'll take you to actual GitHub. But this was a project, they were like, here, spend however many hours building this, and as far as you get is as far as you get. Oh, fancy! Look, it's Ajax, guys. Some fancy pagination going on there. Anyway. But yeah, this was a project where it was like build a thing, demonstrate that you can like software engineering, and kind of build a project in some amount of time, which I thought was pretty cool. I had fun building this, even though like who cares? It doesn't actually do anything interesting, and it's ugly as sin, but it was fun, and I thought it was like kind of a good test of, or a good like objective test of how someone would write code. Like given a spec, build something from scratch. I thought that was a good kind of interview tactic. Another one that I really liked was, I mean, I hated interviewing for the company, but this one interview type was pretty cool. Or at least it was cool on paper until I actually did it, and then it sucked because I'll tell you in a sec why it sucked. But the idea was they're like, hey, we're going to give you a laptop. It has a code base checked out. There was a bug in the code base. Here's what was reported by an end user. Take the stack trace, figure out what's broken in the code base, write a test for it, and fix it. Which I think is very realistic for how someone would go about finding or like encountering a bug and then figuring out how a code base works and then actually solving the problem. And so that aspect of it I thought was really cool. The problem was how this company executed on this. So first, they handed me a MacBook, and I was like, well, I don't really want to deal with macOS, but I can deal. Like, I'm an adult. I know how to use a computer. This is fine. Which I was like, okay, whatever. As long as you have tools installed on it, I'll be fine. And then they looked at each other, and they're like, So I had a Git repo on this laptop, but Git was not installed. So I couldn't actually like poke around in the history or like try and learn anything about how a project was set up or like what recent commits happened around the time that the bug was reported or anything like that. So I couldn't use Git. They also like didn't have any text editors installed. Like they had like they had like the things that ship with the operating system. So fortunately for me, it was Nano. So Nano worked fine. But like they didn't have like IntelliJ or PyCharm or anything nice, which is good for like poking around a code base you've never looked at before. And the kicker, the absolute worst part about it, was there was no internet connection on the laptop. So I, like, as I showed you guys before, like, you use the internet, and, like, I Google search things all the time and read docs, and that's, like, an integral part of development. And, like, they didn't give me that, so I couldn't do that at all. It was pretty crappy. But like the idea was good, they just didn't execute it well at all. Was the project in lieu of an on-site? No, it was more like a, instead of doing a phone screen. Although I think it could have replaced some parts of the on-site, which would have been nice. That sounds like a horrible experience, they set you up for failure. Yeah, it didn't help that the interview that I had right before that was with this, like, math major who was not a programmer, and then he was trying to ask, like, algorithmic, like he wanted me to design binary search on a whiteboard, and I was like, I don't have to design it, I'm just going to import bisect, and that's going to be my answer. He's like, oh, well, okay, fine. And then he, like, moved on to a different problem, and he's like, okay, how would you translate a red-black tree over a network? And I was like, well, I could do some like fancy bit twiddling, but that's going to be really hard to maintain, and so like the easiest way is just like convert it to JSON and then gzip the JSON and shove that over the wire. And that's probably going to be as performant as you're going to get, and like the difference in bytes between like micro-optimizing and doing that is insignificant because gzip is actually really, really good. And he was not happy with that solution, so he made me re-implement JSON on a whiteboard, and I've done that too many times, so that part was easy. But I was just like very frustrated with the approach that the interviewer was doing. But yeah, it was interviewing's frustrating, and sometimes you get interviews that are just bad. I started to learn programming a couple weeks ago. A little scared. Feels like it's a really long way. Yeah, so starting programming, everything's gonna be hard, and that's just the way things go, I guess. But if you stick with it and you like keep practicing and keep like trying new things and learning stuff and like asking good questions, you'll get way better at it way faster. Which I don't know, like stick with it, it gets better, it gets easier. What are the must-learn tools? So I think like absolutely like the thing you absolutely need to learn the most about is whatever text editor you want to use, like whatever development environment you're using. Like learn how to use your text editor so that you're not constantly fighting with it, or like constantly trying to figure out like, oh well, how do I find and replace text, or like how do I open files. Like get really good at that stuff. Depending on like what sort of software you're writing, you'll want to know like how to use a terminal. More so than just like basic commands and stuff. Like you'll want to learn keyboard shortcuts and that kind of thing. But if you're in like enterprise software, you probably don't use a terminal all that often. I would learn whatever version control system you're using. The most popular one probably in the world right now is Git, and it's all right. I would learn a version control system, or learn whatever version control system is relevant to what you're working on. If you work with GitHub a lot, I would learn its ins and outs and its tricky bits. What else? Learn how to use Google and Stack Overflow, especially together. And so like searching site Stack Overflow your programming question is pretty helpful. But I didn't know this for the longest time, and once I guess the site stackoverflow.com. This is super useful for finding information or like narrowing down Google searches. But other than that, like I don't know what other tools you would learn or need to know. Oh, you figured out your your memory address writing thing. Xbox1.text equals val. Oh, I see. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, no problem. Glad to help. Okay, so I have a bunch of tabs open. Hey, don't rag on Nano, it's my guilty pleasure. I mean, I'm using Nano, so... I know it's not the best text editor, and I do know how to use Vim. So, like, I promise I'm not a complete noob, but... Tips on dealing with imposter syndrome. Oh. Let me tell you, I know I'm good at programming, and I still deal with imposter syndrome all the time. I think that... Yeah, it's really hard to deal with. I think the biggest thing that when I'm like trying to count myself out of something, or like my brain is trying to count myself out of something, is I just think to myself like everyone else is going through the same thing. Like my peers are all in the same boat. They're not much better or worse than I am. I might feel like I don't know how to do if I have imposter syndrome, what chance do you have? Yeah. I mean, to be honest, like it's a hard mindset to avoid. I just try and think of like all the things that I'm good at, and like that helps me forget that I might not be good at other things, I guess. How do you write good unit tests? Might be easier to look at that book you recommended. I often get stuck and actually end up writing more of integration tests versus testing my code. So integration tests aren't always bad. I think a lot of the like writing good tests comes from like structuring code in a way that's testable. And I mean, this project that I'm working on here is maybe not the best example, although like it's very easy here to like have an input run something and then check the outputs. Like when you can have a function that has pure inputs and pure outputs, that makes the tests a lot easier to write. What I find from dealing in code bases or like work code bases or stuff that I don't contribute to, I find that a trap that people fall into a lot is they'll try and test a procedure being like a function that calls this function and then takes the return value of that and calls some other function and then takes the return value of that and like calls some other function, like kind of a stepwise way of executing code. And I actually find that those functions those procedures are not good candidates for tests, or not good candidates for unit tests. Because like this was a trap that I fell into when I was a new engineer as well. It's like you get these procedures which are a bunch of like function, and like someone else would be like, oh well, did you write a test for it? And then your test would be like mock out 50 functions, call the function that calls the 50 functions, and then like assert that the value got passed in between them. And those just aren't good tests for a couple of reasons. Like the biggest reason is anytime somebody modifies the code in that procedure, your tests are completely broken, even if the functionality still works properly. And in those cases, I find like the better way to test those procedural tests is to set up a world state, call the function, then establish or like assert on the world state after it. And so you do end up writing like kind of integration tests. And the way you avoid them from being like super flaky is you mock out any of the parts that are going to perform catastrophic side effects. So like things like making a network call or interacting with a database. But you don't try and mock out the individual functions, you just mock out the like layers that you can't possibly control under test. And then you still end up with a test that's like kind of broad scope, but at least you've controlled all of the like surprising inputs, and you can make strong assertions about the transitions of the input state to the output state. But those are kind of like the you have to cut your losses because the code's tangly already kind of situations. Like if you can be in a situation where you're writing pure functions from the beginning, you can set yourself up to write better tests and test your code in a better way. Hopefully that answers the question a little bit. I'm not sure, I actually haven't read the book that I've suggested, I've just heard exceptionally good things about it. I assume it goes into details about structuring tests in there a little bit. Would it be better to use a test database? Yes, like if you have the chance to like use a database that you can directly connect to and like have fixtures that are already set up and like checkpoints to where you can like run a test and then tear everything down the test might have modified. That's like kind of your ideal case for an integration test. The problem with that though is you end up in a situation where as you kind of are fighting two separate forces. Like one is like when you mock everything out, your tests are fast, but they might not accurately represent your world state. And then you go to the other side of the spectrum where you're using real stuff, which makes your tests execute slower, but it's more accurate to how the code actually executes. And so kind of in that like integration test versus mocking trade-off world, you kind of have to like strike a balance where your tests are fast enough to be useful as a tool to write code, but also like comprehensive enough that they're actually testing your behaviors properly. And sometimes it's hard to strike that balance. Like even in pre-commit, which is a framework that touches a lot of interfaces, like some of the tests don't test the code very well. And like often there's bugs, and like even though I have 100% test coverage, which means like every line of code gets run, like there's some tool integrations or scenarios that you can't possibly detect with code coverage. And some of the tests that I write are pretty slow. Like my entire test suite takes somewhere around like 7 to 10 minutes. And some of the tests themselves take like 30 seconds. Oh, I guess I don't have durations enabled here, but I guess my test suite takes 4 minutes and change. But like some of those tests are pretty freaking slow. But some of those tests are also some of the better ones that make sure I don't break things when I refactor stuff. But I don't know. Testing is hard to get right. Like if you take away one thing from the stuff I just said, like try and avoid mock tests. And ideally, so like some cases you can avoid those kind of tests by just using type annotations. And like here's like a user story from oh, I didn't mean to click on the hashtag, dang it. Like this was at work the other day, we wrote, or there were these two like really large tests that were mocking out a bunch of things that had side effects. It was essentially these procedure type tests. And what the tests were checking was a regression that had happened where a test accidentally passed none into a function, which caused it to fail. And we managed to fix this problem by, instead of like writing these gnarly tests, we just made a type annotation so that the type checker forced us to pass a value into this function. And so like we essentially avoided writing these really crappy tests by instead having a type annotation. And so like sometimes tests aren't the answer. What's up, Intose Luluped? How's it going? Your name is dark blue on black, and so it's really hard for me to see, but you didn't get a choice in the name. I think that was just the random color that Twitch chose for that. But yeah, this was like a pretty cool situation where testing was not the right answer, and like picking the right tool for the job was good. Holy crap, there are 18 of you watching me, and it's a Tuesday. Usually my weekday streams see like 5 to 10 people, but I guess you guys have nothing else to do on a Tuesday night. I guess it's not necessarily night for you guys. It always depends on what your goal is when testing. Guard against regressions, testing validity for the expected input domains, aka type tests, or testing complex coordination, which could also be done with session types. Yeah. What are we doing right now? Well, I don't think I've written a line of code in almost 2 hours now. I was working on a formatting tool, but for the last bunch of time we've been talking about things like interviews and testing and other stuff like that. I guess I think I've written, let's see. I guess I wrote a couple lines of code. Not a good ratio. I've written like 50 lines of code in the last 3.5 hours. So good job me, I guess. But most of it's been talking. Do you have a bigger fear in hiring someone who isn't what you thought, or not hiring someone who could have been good? So you're not going to like the answer to that question, unfortunately. Generally, the rule of thumb is if we're on the fence with a candidate, we usually say no hire. Which probably means that we bypass people that would have been great, and sometimes that happens, and like people have bad interviews or bad days or bad weeks or bad months, and unfortunately the interview process isn't super forgiving in that. Sometimes we do ask for additional interviews, but sometimes like we just don't have the bandwidth or the interviewers to do that. It's unfortunate. Most times, at least most of the times that I've been in interview panels where it's like we're super on the fence with this guy, we ask, like we go and ask a second round of interviews, and like sometimes that's better, and sometimes we get a better response out of those. But the like absolute worst situation is hiring somebody who isn't good enough for the job, because it's like it's a big waste of our time, and it's a big waste of their time, and hiring people sucks. And it doesn't happen very often at Lyft, at least that I've seen, but it's not fun for any party involved, and having underperformers on your team also isn't fun. But yeah, so we tend to lean more towards like the negative side, unfortunately, but it's the risk reward trade-off that we have to make. How much do soft skills play in the hiring decision? For us, surprisingly a lot. Lyft tries to emphasize our culture a lot, and so like if you're selfish or toxic or like not gonna play well with others or those sorts of things, like that, as much as you can determine that in an interview, like that factors into the hiring process a lot. Although one thing that we're told is to avoid like referring to it as soft skills, because that can introduce bias into the process, and like I forget what we're supposed to actually refer to it as, and like phrase the way that we talk about that sort of concept, but because it's super easy to take like culture fit as a term and like turn that into like, oh well, your people aren't compatible with me or whatever. I don't know. It's a slippery slope. Don't worry, bro. Sometimes it's like that. Yeah. But I don't know. I've been talking with chat, and that's been interesting too. Whether you guys have just seen the same screen for forever. How can an underperformer pick up the pace to contribute more impact? Ooh, that's another good question. So the one thing that I've seen underperformers do that you absolutely should not do in a situation like that is work more hours or like spend free time working on work. Like that is absolutely not the way to approach that, because you'll end up burning out and like being worse for everything. I think like the biggest way that I've seen junior engineers grow into bigger roles at companies is by picking up or like having a core contribution role on a project, like focusing on one thing and making sure that they get that deliverable out, and then like once they show that they can do that, also like contributing to the design portion of projects. And like a lot of the like moving up in an engineering organization is like stepping out of your comfort zone and like trying to put yourself into situations where you can make contributions. So like I'll give you an example. One of the people on my team joined from an enterprise software company where they weren't really working on like they were kind of a cog in the machine. So that tends to be how like these 5,000 to 10,000 engineer companies function, or like 10 to 40,000 engineer companies function. Like you get your spec, you never really talk to anyone else, you implement your code, and then you never see it again. And his experience coming to Lyft was pretty different from that setup. And so like at first he was having trouble adjusting to like how you could make a bigger impact and stuff. And thank you Jose Luluped for following. Every follow counts. And he like I had to sit down with him and I was like, hey, like notice like you're I tried to put it nicely, I forget what I said, but it was like, hey, I've noticed like you might be having some trouble fitting in. Like I went through the same transition too, where like I worked at an enterprise software and then moved to a software company that didn't do stuff the same way, and like here's some like projects that we're working on that might be interesting, you might want to check them out, and like we'll be able to like make a contribution there. And like I think like just getting the engineer to be like focused and like comfortable and like okay to feel like, hey, like despite like not performing at the level that they could perform at, like they were still accepted and wanted. That went a long way to like sparking them to try and work on stuff that they weren't familiar with, or like try and learn new things. And just recently, this same engineer has actually taken on the lead of a project that's super important to our team, and has kind of like transitioned a lot from like cog in the machine to making a big impact by driving a project, which I think is really cool. But yeah, try and get involved with things. Like don't be afraid to talk to people. Like talking to people is actually probably the best way to like get promoted. I don't want to say it that way, but like having friends or like having people that you can demonstrate impact to really goes a long way. How's Lyft's onboarding process? So it's changed a lot since I onboarded, partially because we have like 1,000 engineers now and we had like 300 people before. But the onboarding process has changed a little bit. I think the way it works now is you spend like half a week doing the typical like HR bullshit where it's like, this is how the company functions, this is how your benefits are, this is how you log into your computer systems that do stuff for HR and blah blah blah. So that part's pretty like boring and standard. The next kind of part to that is the engineering onboarding, where we take an engineer through the most common things that they'll do. So first they'll like set up their laptop and like get situated with their development environment and I don't know, kind of like get set up with all of the like connections to GitHub and SSH so they can get to production machines. Well, not necessarily production machines, but machines in EC2, and like get set up with AWS credentials and all that stuff. And so that's like the second half of the first week is like engineering onboarding. And then the next week they go through a couple of like mini classes that show like how to make a contribution at Lyft. So like one of them, we have this service called Favorite Emoji, and basically you check in a file with a function that you can hit with a web browser that a web browser or curl that returns your favorite emoji. And it kind of shows you like how you add code to a repository, how you add tests for that code, how you start up a service and run kind of stuff. And that's kind of like the first introduction to like Lyft code bases. Thank you, Mr. Bald, for following. Every follow counts. And then after that, you go through I think we call it deploy day, where you build a change and you use the deploy tooling to integrate it into a code base. And like the way we do development is you make a pull request and then somebody reviews it, and then you use emojis to like merge it and deploy it, which I think is kind of silly. Maybe I'm a little bit curmudgeon-y, but we use emojis to merge code. And then we have some bots in Slack, and you talk to a Slack bot, and that's how you deploy code to production. And deploy day kind of, it's not that I hate emojis, I just think they're kind of silly. But like on deploy day, you take a change out to production, and that kind of introduces you to the code tools. And then from there, you're kind of dumped off on your team. I don't want to say like dumped off, but like it's kind of how it works. And then your team will usually have like team-specific onboarding. For my team, we usually do kind of two parts. Like one of them is like one of the engineers will sit down with the new hire and walk them through our most common code bases. So for us, it's usually let's see. Do I still have it open? I'll open it again. But yeah, like we walk them through, in the case of my team, we walk them through control, we walk them through a couple of things in containers and like other tools that they're going to be working with from our team's perspective. But then we also talk through like the history of how the infrastructure got to where it is today, and like where we want to take it tomorrow, and how all the bits fit together, and like we kind of do like a team-specific education seminar. That said, like that functions pretty differently from feature teams, and I assume feature teams do all sorts of different stuff to onboard their people. But it's kind of how our onboarding works. Hopefully that answers your question. We also try and get people pushing code as early as possible, just so that they get familiar with the process and can start working on stuff. For our new hires, we try and give them like a 1-hour task first, and then ramp it up to like a 1-day task, and then a several-week project before they start working on like a larger scale project. Just to like kind of get them ramped up with deploy processes and like how we communicate changes and stuff like that. I just finished my data science assignment last weekend, still waiting for the recruiter to get back. Well, good luck, babe Angela. Hopefully that goes well for you. I wish I knew more about data science. I feel like that's one of my areas of programming where I'm the weakest and haven't really done enough to learn that segment of stuff. But maybe one day. But not today, I guess. What is my GitHub notification? Oh. Lift stuff. Can't show you that. You're an expert in Python, so you're halfway there. I mean, there's still a lot of stuff that I don't know about Python. I'm pretty good, but there's always new stuff to learn, and I learn stuff about Python all the time. I just happen to know lots of terrible things about Python. But like, for example, today I had roughly worked with tkinter before, but I was able to basically Google around, like figure some stuff out, and like work on some stuff. Oh, it's Lyft's data science assignment. That's cool. Well, hopefully that goes well for you. You want me to poke a recruiter? Send me a DM, and I'll nudge them, and hopefully maybe be able to move you along in the process. But yeah, I don't do any data science interviews though, so I can't really help you out there. But I could talk to the recruiter for you. But yeah, tkinter is an example of like, I had heard of it. I had written like 3 lines before, but I was able to take the example code that was given in chat and like kind of work with it and play around with it and look at the docs and figure some stuff out. Like, I don't know tkinter all that well. I have vague ideas about how graphics frameworks should work, or how like window management frameworks should work, and so it's kind of like apply some knowledge, but at the same time, like, I learned something today. It's kind of cool. I'm also losing my voice, so it's probably a little overdue for me to call the stream and go to bed at this point. Because I actually have to interview someone tomorrow, so hopefully I'll be able to talk for that. But yeah, let me wind this down now. So if you missed any part of the stream, it will be up on YouTube hopefully by tomorrow. My YouTube channel is the same as my... Babe Angel isn't my real name. Well, I figured as much. But yeah, I'm gonna wind the stream down. If you missed any part of the stream, it'll be up on YouTube later. My YouTube handle is the same as my Twitch handle, so youtube.com/code. Oh shit! Wait, which one is it? No, that's my Twitter handle. youtube.com/AnthonyWritesCode. I usually announce my streams on Twitter, so if you follow me on Twitter, that one's twitter.com/codewithanthony. You can find that in the description. I don't have a schedule, but I'm trying to make a schedule where I stream every Saturday at 1 Pacific. I don't know that I'll keep that up, but it's been the last 2 or 3 weeks now, so... Oh no! You're rating me right as I leave. No! Hey, RW Grim. Hey, you work on Pigeon, right? I use Pigeon. I have IRC over here. Look, I use it. Pigeon's really great, so thanks for that. But yeah, I'm actually heading out right now because I've been streaming for 4 hours. But thanks for the raid. Sorry I'm leaving now. But yeah, I have to go to work tomorrow, so I have to catch some sleep. So I guess now I'll have to find someone to raid then. So sorry you guys are getting bounced around, but let me find someone then. Who else is streaming in technology right now? Oh boy, where's the categories? Alright, here we go. Another raid. Yeah, you're on to the next one now. Wait, I clicked on the category. Why did it not? Shush, stop. No. I clicked on someone's channel. I'm so bad at Twitch. There we go, science and technology. What the hell? Why are you not taking me to the category? That's just the directory. Alright, I think Twitch is broken. Programming, there we go. So, let's see. A lot of people are working on game programming today. Yeah, that's what I was trying to get to, was the programming category, or the programming tag. Let's see. This one is not working on programming. You are playing a video game. Let's see what this one's about. It looks like they're making a game engine. That one sounds cool. There's a few sites that have a ton of programming streams too, just saying. Ooh. Some terrible C++. Do you guys want to see some terrible C++? Oh, this is mature audiences, so I don't know that I can raid from a... Can I? I don't know if that works. Belly.io/programming. I'll have to check that out. I don't think I've seen this before. Oh. I see. Oh, hey. How's it going? Let's do... We'll just pick this one. We'll make sure that they're actually programming. Let me make sure that they're actually writing code first. Don't want to send you guys to a channel where they're just not doing anything. Oh, they're hosting. Okay, well, that won't help. And they're playing video games. Okay. This guy seems to actually be writing code, so we're gonna raid him. User 335 is doing code for his game. Okay. Let's see. Alright. Done. That one actually does look like code. So, there we go. Alright, we're gonna raid them. See you guys. I'm heading out. Have a good one. He usually has like 5 people watching. Well, he's about to get 25, so say hi from me and from RW Grimm, and have a good night.